Time now for the Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.
And Alex Pfeiffer, the White House Deputy Assistant in Comms, stopped by yesterday to talk with us at the White House. Here's the conversation. Alex Pfeiffer, part of the White House Comm Shop. It is good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me on. I'm psyched.
What a team you guys have assembled. It is really impressive to be as nimble as you all are with the constantly changing news. I was talking to some of your colleagues today. It's a fire hydrant every day. You got to be ready to go.
It's been a very close-knit team because we've worked together for so long. So a lot of us, like Caroline and I, we've worked for nearly 3 years now together. Same with this guy, Taylor Budowich, Deputy Chief of Staff Helps from Comms, because a lot of the team was essentially either you're the super PAC or the campaign, and we've been working together all throughout the 24 race into the White House. So it's been just a consistent group of people, which has made it very fun.
What do you look at from the, maybe you don't, maybe you can't, I don't know. I look at the first 4 years, it's demonstrably different, and I wonder if it's different because you have the 4 years of Biden to kind of strategize about how you want to hit the ground running. That's my sense of it. Is that true?
Well, I think the second term has been different to the first term purely as a matter of experience. As the president himself has said, when he came along in the first term, he had never, lived in D.C. or spent any sort of significant amount of time here. And obviously, going to the second term, he has all the experience of the first term, knowledge of the power players, who he works well with, who he doesn't work well with, and same from the staff side. This time you have people here in the White House who were there for all 4 years of the first term. And then other people, I wasn't there in the first term, but I was there on the campaign with the team. So I think it's just there is more institutional knowledge, and also the party has changed. In the first term, there was still sort of that struggle within the Republican Party where there were some elements that did not like the president. That doesn't really exist anymore in the Republican Party. So I think it's more of a well-oiled machine.
That's a really interesting thing, and you know better than anybody. Back channels, the whisper down the lane stuff, publicly somebody may say one thing, but behind the scenes, I don't get the sense that behind the scenes there's that muttering and recalcitrant Republican presence. It seems like it's sort of get on board and understand what the country wants or get out of the way this time.
The attitude here at the White House and the administration is when the president calls the play, we run it. There is no, I remember in the first term, and I was in media actually in the first term, I was a Daily Caller, and then I was a producer at Fox for Tucker. We'd always read these stories about such and such aid trying to stop such and such policy, and that's not something I've ever experienced firsthand or even read a story about happening here. There's not that attitude. Instead, it's how do we deliver?
I couldn't help but notice the beautiful new flag on the lawn. There are two of them. Couple that with the ballroom that the president's proposing be built. He wants to leave a lasting legacy beyond his stay here, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. And has there been much pushback on that?
I think in general, when it comes to pushback, it's been, there'll be, stupid New York Times article here or there, but I don't think there's any been real significant pushback to the... Because
I was talking, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was talking to a colleague of mine, and it's like, you can't, I don't care who you are, you can't come in and rip the flagpoles down, right? You're not going to tear down a ballroom. I'm sure there are people that would love to do that if a Democrat were to ever come in. But my point is, what President Trump is doing is very reminiscent of what President Truman did with the remodel and the balcony and whatnot. That's what I envision anyway.
Yeah, also, you should leave things better than you found them. Why wouldn't, and also as he's using his own money to do this, and if any time there has to be other money, it's fundraised, it's not taxpayer dollars. But why wouldn't we leave the White House more beautiful than he came in with? And the president's a builder at heart, so he enjoys this stuff.
That's what I noticed also, and I wrote a little about this in my newsletter. This president loves to be with the people doing the work. Nobody puts on a hard hat, walks amongst the people, the McDonald's, the classic campaign stop. The guy, you wouldn't think a billionaire could pull it off, but he does. He comes off as an everyman, and he wants to be on the front lines, handing out burgers, talking to people, shaking their hands. It's impressive as hell.
Well, he became a billionaire by being on construction sites, and when they were remodeling the Rose Garden, he was there every single day talking with the guys working on the projects. I think Last week on Friday, he had some guys in his office. So he's nonstop, talking with all the actual, people who get dirt on their hands.
Like, did you guys know he was going to walk up on the roof? That classic shot of him walking the roof. Did you guys know he was doing that?
We had very little advance warning, but the Secret Service made sure everything was good. And why wouldn't he walk up on the roof? I probably would if I were the president.
But I mean, just for those of us that don't know, give us a glimpse into that day. He says, I want to go to the roof, and tells who? Secret Service obviously has to make sure he's safe.
Yeah, obviously that, and other senior staff gets a heads up, but it's not like a date. It's not like 24 hours ahead. We know about that. It's a little more last minute.
He can still call audibles like that.
Oh, there are a lot of audibles called, and that's what I think is wonderful about this White House. There is no sort of bureaucratic process. If we want to do something, we do it. I mean, take D.C., for example. I think the president was sick and tired of seeing headlines and news stories about violence in our nation's capital. Now, we are the world's wealthiest nation. We're the most powerful. There is no reason that our capital should have a higher homicide rate than Bogota, Colombia, right? No one would assume that the capital of D.C. has a higher rate than the capital of Colombia, yet that's the case. That's true. In fact, in 2023, I think this is kind of an interesting stat, D.C. had roughly the same murder rate as Trinidad and Tobago. The State Department tells Americans to reconsider travel to Trinidad and Tobago because of crime. It's one of the nations that they're like, you shouldn't travel to. Well, our capital has roughly the same murder rate. And so the president's sick and tired of that. So he's like, I can't just watch this happen. Other presidents would watch it happen. Other presidents would start a blue ribbon commission. They would have some white paper report 2 years in the making. Instead, we deployed the National Guard. We surged federal assets. And D.C., for the first time in a very long time, went a week without a homicide. Now, I know that sounds normal for listeners listening from a nice town or city or community, but in D.C., going a week without a murder is very significant. And a stat I checked in before we started this interview, carjackings in D.C. are down 90%. Wow. So these are all, and D.C. last year, the police, they posted on their social media, tips to avoid carjacking. And it was like, drive in the middle lane. When you're driving, make sure your car doors are locked. I mean, that's dystopian. If the Capitol Police is to tell residents driving tips to avoid carjacking, that's something you'd expect in, Mogadishu. And so the president wasn't willing to stand by and watch that happen. Now, I realize it's a weird segue from rocking on the roof to this, but it's about who the man is. He's someone who doesn't just want to... when he wants to take action, he takes it.
Well, by the way, one of your own administration, from the Doge Committee, famously called Big Balls, he gets pummeled the way he did in trying to rescue a woman from being carjacked. I imagine that becomes very personal to all of you here at the White House.
Yes. And it was in DuPont Circle, by the way, which if people aren't familiar with D.C., DuPont Circle is a fine neighborhood. I used to live there. It's not at all some place you would be expected to get pummeled and there to be a carjacking. It's an all right neighborhood, yet that sort of stuff happens. And I guess it kind of says something, about the crime issue that were happening in what's considered a nice place. So, we weren't going to watch this happen, and we've produced results. And as the president has been saying, we might have to bring this effort to other American cities because, every American has the right to walk to work, to walk to school, to play in their front yard, to fall safely, and to fall asleep without hearing the sound of gunshots.
Shifting hard here, last week, or over a week ago now, meeting with Vladimir Putin, and you talk about optics in Alaska. Social media went crazy with that image of the B-52 flying overhead. Was that a message sent, or just a celebratory act, or what was that meant to convey?
I think that was a gesture. It wasn't some sort of threatening thing. It was we're not threatening a college football game when we do a flyover.
Social media took it as a flex. Do you think that was correct?
I think it was a cool welcoming. I'll just put it that way. It was a cool welcoming. But, it wasn't anything malicious or whatever. It was a cool welcoming to a head of state for a historic meeting, and truly a historic meeting. I mean, again, obviously, this, as everyone is aware, who's listening, this war started under Joe Biden, and he didn't even meet with Putin, right? So achieving peace here is not some easy thing. But the president's doing all the steps that are necessary because, in the end, for there to be peace, Russia and Ukraine will have to come to agreement. That's why it's necessary to meet with Putin. It's why it's necessary to meet with Zelensky, and hope we can find some sort of resolution.
I'll close with this question. It consistently is important to this White House. It was in the first term. It continues to be this year. This is, I think, our fourth visit. in the first 7 months of your administration. Talking to people, reaching audiences like ours. That's clearly a priority, and it continues to be a priority. And this is Republican and Democrat alike prior to President Trump. Politicians at this level don't like questions. They don't like guys, even people that are considered friendly or have voted for them. They don't like answering a lot of questions. This White House continues to make it a priority.
Well, you need to make it a priority because people don't know what you're doing if you're not communicating to them, right? So my in-laws were in town visiting the other week, and I was like, oh, yes, the president just, flew back from Alaska last night. And my sister-in-law was like, what was he in Alaska for? And I was like, man, we're not doing a good enough job communicating. So, you have to reach people because if you're not, they're not going to know what you're doing.
Well, we're grateful for the invitation. We're grateful for your responsiveness every time we reach out, and thank you for taking the questions today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Stay informed anytime, anywhere with the Salem News Channel and 9:30 a.m. TheAnswer.com. This has been The Daily Answer, sponsored by Salem Surround on The Answer Now TV.
It's Chris Stigall, and you're watching The Answer Now TV.